On this video, I'd like to talk about inverse tangent. And if you look at the graph of tangent x, again, it does not pass horizontal line test. Therefore, we need to limit our domain from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. When we do that, tangent x will have an inverse. So when you graph inverse tangent, the domain of tangent x, which was negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, becomes range of inverse tangent, and the range of tangent x, which was negative infinity to infinity, becomes a domain of inverse tangent. So again, we have restriction on inverse tangent. That is, it will go from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Now, some of you might think that looks similar to the restriction on inverse sine x, but there's a slight difference. On inverse tangent, we don't include the endpoint, whereas on inverse sine x, we included the endpoints. Let's take a look at some examples. Let's first look at arctangent of negative radical 3 over 3. So this means this whole thing is theta. So we're looking for tangent of what angle will equal to negative radical 3 over 3. Now recall, we just talked about the restriction on inverse tangent, which goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Tangent is negative second and fourth quadrant. Therefore, based on the restriction we have to ignore second quadrant. So what is this angle right here? First of all, tangent of what is radical 3 over 3? Well, that's when theta is pi over 6. So therefore, this reference angle over here will be pi over 6. But again, look at the restriction. Restriction goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Therefore, theta has to be negative pi over 6. Let's take a look at another example. Inverse tangent of negative 1. We're looking for theta such that tangent of theta is negative 1. Again, tangent is negative second and fourth quadrant. What was the restriction again for inverse tangent? Negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Tangent theta, what theta, so such that tangent theta equals 1. Well, that's when theta is pi over 4. So again, we ignore the second quadrant because tangent theta has to be negative. The reference angle will be pi over 4, but then the angle that we're looking for will be negative pi over 4.